As another illustration of why functioning labels suck, I want to read something I wrote a while ago about being late diagnosed. I spent most of my life without a proper diagnosis. As a child, my parents and teachers had concerns about my performance in school and interaction with other kids. I was slow to walk, and when I did walk, I walked on my toes. I had difficulty with language, I had difficulty pronouncing words, and while I would respond to questions and play with kids who approached me, I spent a lot of time on my own and never initiated interactions with anyone but my parents. I had meltdowns. My parents sent me to a speech pathologist, and the school assigned me a resource teacher for a couple of months. But you see, I was gifted, and while I struggled with some aspects of language, they didn't technically qualify as a speech delay. It was concluded that I didn't have anything too seriously wrong, and that all my problems must just be a result of my premature birth and attachment problems, and probably laziness too. My adoptive parents were told that I would grow out of my speech issues, and the resource teacher was dropped. For a while, I seemed to grow out of it. Or at least I learned to force myself to walk flat on my feet in public and speak rarely and just above a whisper to avoid having my pronunciation and tone criticized. I taught myself not to spin or clap or jump or complain about how the noise or the lights bothered me. I ate the minimum amount of food that my parents asked me to, and I tried not to vomit from the textures. In spite of my parents' best intentions, I learned that I was wrong. And I learned that my awareness of my own body was wrong, that I couldn't trust my own perceptions, and that it was important to impress adults and prove myself to them. My grades improved, I became the teacher's pet. I didn't question the rules, and I tottered every day on the verge of a breakdown. When I slipped up, I knew it was because something was wrong with me. I was a good student, I was a good kid, but I was never quite good enough to be a good neurotypical. I wasn't diagnosed, but in that whole time, I wasn't neurotypical. Later on, I was misdiagnosed. Then I was put on inappropriate medication with dangerous side effects. As a result, I stopped going to the doctor and was without health care for a year or two. Finally, I went into the Students with Disabilities office in desperation. I dropped out of my undergrad for medical reasons, and the university arranged for first rounds of testing. And the testing came back, and it showed something. But of course, that something couldn't have been autism. Everybody knows autistics don't go to university. That's why I had classes with other people who were autistic, and some of my friends were autistic. Because we don't go to university. But with a referral from the psychologist at Student Services, I got a new healthcare provider, and things started to improve. I went back to school after a term off, and I got my degree. I graduated with honors, and I got a job. And I burned out. I lost my job, I had regressions. Without the predictability of school, I struggled with the executive functioning needed for even basic tasks. I lost weight again, and I was assaulted because I couldn't read the social cues to identify the assailant as dangerous. I started stimming openly, but I made art, I had talents, I kept reading textbooks for fun. I taught myself new skills, sewed my own clothes without patterns. I learned to knit by looking at old blankets, and I was told I was a genius by people who didn't know me well. I got lost a block from my mom's house and had to call people to find me. I couldn't look in my fridge and figure out what was available to eat, much less the steps for preparing it, because my brain wouldn't connect the visual image of food with the concept of food. I struggled to get through basic interactions like buying things at the store, and I needed assistance buying groceries. I struggled with language on more days than not, and I had meltdowns. A lot of these things I'd been struggling with throughout my life, to a greater or lesser degree, but most of the time I was better at masking it. After I burned out, I couldn't hide it anymore, so we began to look into getting professional help. We asked about sensory processing disorder or if something had been missed in the learning disability diagnosis. Nothing accounted for everything I was experiencing. Anxiety may have been a factor in some problems, but some of them were present as an infant, and treatment for anxiety wasn't working. Initially, we couldn't get a psychologist to test me because I was an adult and because I'd gone to university. I was finally diagnosed when I was 24. Throughout all of that, a major hurdle was people's misconceptions about what autism should look like. No one knew what to do when I showed traits that were considered both high functioning and others that could be labeled as low functioning. In reality, functioning labels aren't useful. I have specific strengths and weaknesses. Some of them are related to being autistic, but none of them fit easily into a homogeneous stereotype of what autism is.